So if you are still on Twitter, there is an AI tool called Grok that's been around for a while, and it basically acts as essentially an AI assistant that you can essentially call from the heavens by saying at Grok and then requesting it do things. A lot of people you'll see use Grok to say like, hey, is this true? To essentially act like a fact checker whenever they see something that's published online. What has been happening recently, they see pictures of children and women on Twitter, and they have at Grok remove these clothes or put them in a bikini or put them in a certain like position or something like this. And because there is very limited regulation on AI and Elon's going to do what Elon's going to do, it took a lot of people mad about this for them to try to do something about it. And some, not all, but some of the accounts that asked Grok to do these things were disabled. If you looked at Grok's account and looked at the media, they kind of removed a lot of the media that Grok had done to kind of like undo this, but it doesn't undo the non-consensual harassment that is clearly being done. And that's not even getting into the specifics of it when it was done for children, like clearly underage. And so when we're looking at this and we're looking at AI proliferation and how it's being done, I think we are kind of in the same way we've been doing about this with social media over the past like 10 years. We really need to keep going back to the conversation of regulation, because I get businesses not wanting regulation because it slows things down, it prevents innovation, as they say. But I think that there definitely needs to be some guardrails and safety rails when it comes to what can AI be used for and what can it not be used for, because there's going to be bad actors. And so I think this is a very public display of how AI can be used incorrectly, how it can victimize people. And the UK has already come forward to specifically ask how Twitter and Elon are doing, like what steps they're doing to prevent this from happening in the future, because the UK does have safeguards, not necessarily against AI, but for consumers. And we as a society, not just as Americans, but we as a society need to figure out like if and when these guardrails should be put in place. And if so, what should they? But I think this is definitely a call to arms for that.
Yeah, like there's so many things here, right? Where
Yes,
it's
no,
like
it's definitely multi-layered for sure.
you have like the comms PR side of like what is Twitter doing? What is Elon doing? Does it even seem as if they're trying to approach a fix to the problem? I remember what a couple years ago it's like they would like get rid of accounts that were acting against the terms of service, and it's like,
Mhm.
wouldn't this be one of those things where it's like you have I mean, the really bad one, right? It's child pornography, right?
Yes.
That's essentially what it is, child
Yes.
pornography on the Twitter feed that AI is doing. And then on top of that, you have, what's essentially like rage porn against like
Mhm.
women.
Yep.
The pictures that I've seen are like women sharing like accomplishments or like happy moments,
Yes.
and then you have some like bot coming in and saying like remove
Yeah.
clothes, and it just kind of like dehumanizes the
And that's
woman.
the
And
point of it. But that's the
right,
point of it. Yeah.
right. And I'm not seeing like Grok kind of like, or Twitter kind of actively step in and try to like message against like what's happening. So it just
Yeah.
seems as if like, clearly they don't care. So like, and yes, they're taking some things of like trying to take it down, but it really doesn't feel as if they're doing enough for it. And that's where it's just like, well, people are left questioning who steps in, who can, create these rules, right? I mean, we've known about at least like rage porn happening and trying to create, laws or regulations about that. I'm pretty sure that's kind of gone nowhere because it's like,
Mhm.
how do you do it? But then it's like, what does it have to do with like marketing? Well, it's like we're
Mhm.
all part of the system, right? We're
Yeah.
all kind of like actively participating in this. And even if you are speaking out against it, um, you're probably going to get targeted, you know?
Yeah.
And
Well,
then,
I think also as marketers, whether we want to believe it or not, we are stewards of the marketing tools that we use.
mhm,
And we should actively be not only creating the content and sharing our knowledge, but we should be working to make the world better. And I know that's like silly Pollyanna idealist of me, but I think we're better than what we're doing. I think that we, as marketers, we know intimately how our work can be used for good and for bad. And we've seen it in a lot of cases. And so we understand, like, it's weird to me to see people who can't wait to go on LinkedIn or go on social and tell you how much they know about something, and then they stay away from the hard stuff.
mm.
We need them fighting to say, like, this is wrong and we should be better than this. We should be taking steps to improve this. I think we are stewards of our industry, and we need to be standing up when we're seeing AI, technology, social media, when we're seeing it being used badly. I think that we
Yeah.
should be the first people to say something about it. I truly do.
Mm. Yeah, just reading more about this, one of the things that Musk initially did was to respond doing the laugh cry emojis and sharing a Grok generated picture of himself in a bikini. And I think that just kind of is very emblematic of his not understanding the overall issue of this, where it's
Yeah.
like it's not the same thing for, him to consent to do this and asking
Yeah.
Grok to do it for him as
Yeah.
opposed to having it done to you. Um
Well, he sees empathy as a weakness, so I would be shocked if he showed empathy. So that reaction feels very on brand.
Mhm. Yeah, it's also kind of goes along the trend of rage baiting
Mhm.
and trying to be edgy as a way to market yourself and troll people. But one of the other examples I wanted to bring up here is another company that's facing similar challenges with
Mhm.
their response to an incident that happened, and that's Polymarket. They had a few users that had placed bets saying that Venezuela was going to be invaded by America. And Polymarket has refused to pay out to them, saying that the incident was not technically an invasion. And it's funny because their users have taken to Twitter to kind of, complain about it, saying like, well, if it wasn't an invasion, then like what was it? They've responded with sarcasm, saying that what was it, like teleportation that like got, Maduro and his wife out? Because otherwise, what would you call it? But I think the bigger thing here is what people started pointing out is that like Polymarket is ultimately deciding what constitutes an invasion or not. And
Uh-huh.
that expands to everything else, right? Like
Mhm.
if they're doing it for this, then they are also making other decisions on how they make payouts for other things that
Mhm.
have been happening, right? I saw a case recently about a somebody had made a bet on like a game where the score was wrong on the television,
Uh-huh.
and he what he had bet was right, but they said that he was wrong because the television had showed that he was wrong, and he like tried to provide evidence and they just like didn't want to pay out because it was a quite a big sum, right? And I
Yeah.
think it's this like blurring of the lines of like what is truth and what is not.
Yeah.
And then realizing that ultimately companies are getting to decide this, right?
Mhm.
Same as Twitter. Twitter is deciding
Mhm.
what is consent or not, and like what is too far and what is not, right?
Mhm.
They took down a lot more of the child pornography ones than they did just the women ones, right? So
Yeah.
clearly they've decided that the
Mhm.
child pornography is obviously wrong, but the ones with just like, women are not as bad, right?
Yeah.
Um and so like I think that's a bigger thing that also, us as marketers can be having those conversations about like, what can companies be deciding, right? Because it's not just we're talking about these two examples because it's
Mhm.
like it's easy to rag on Polymarket because of gambling and Twitter because of Elon and everything going on there. But there's a lot of companies that also make decisions about what affects them and what
Mhm.
doesn't. And those are things that like we also can like talk about and make our own decisions about.
Yeah.
So yeah, did you hear about this Polymarket story, Christina?
I did, and I am fascinated by it because I agree with what you talked about, but I think there's also other
Hmm.
layers to it as well. I think there's the one of, especially with Polymarket and betting, it just makes
Hmm.
me think because I'm watching Fallout right now, and I've like my
Mm,
husband played the video game, so I know that world quite well,
yeah.
and I just keep thinking about Mr. House and like the house always wins, and so it's
Hmm.
very interesting that like yes, we've normalized betting and we've brought it into the digital space, but the house still wins. They're still
Hmm.
going to decide, and just like an insurance company, they don't want to pay you.
Yeah.
They're going to find whatever steps they can to make sure they don't pay you. I think the other thing too is that I think that the normalization of betting and making it possible to bet on absolutely everything, I don't think that that's by accident. I think it desensitizes us.
Hmm.
There's going to be people who are more upset about Venezuela based off of whether or not they made money on the bet versus what actually happened. And I'm
Hmm.
not going to try to get into like a left or right kind of
Right.
space here, but I think that that is important to note is that there are people who have a more visceral reaction based on how they personally benefited from it or not
Hmm.
versus everything good, bad, and ugly that's associated with like what actually happened. And so I think that it's very interesting when we look at like us as a society and from like a sociological perspective, what are we really doing when we have decided I'm going to put my money into this and I'm going to bet on absolutely everything and that's going to be the closest thing that I have to control? And then also talking about how you said they did get rid of the minors, the pictures on Grok that were associated with that, but not necessarily the women. I think that's just a further indictment of being a woman on the internet.
Hmm.
I saw some people saying, well, you shouldn't be putting selfies on the internet. And someone said, like, that's incredibly similar to you shouldn't have worn a short skirt. You asked
Yeah.
for it.
Hmm.
And so I think the fact that those were not all removed, like all in tandem were not
Hmm.
being removed, I think further showcases that we have normalized the sexual harassment of women
Yeah.
online, especially. I don't think that's a controversial statement. I think we have absolutely normalized that. And the fact that you have to have governments come in, you have to have like consumer groups coming in to demand change
Hmm.
for real things to actually happen, I think speaks volumes. I think there's a lot of edgelords that want to rage bait and want to do things, but I also
Hmm.
think that they will only make change once the bigger adult in the room shows up and basically puts them in timeout. Like the
Yeah.
average consumer does not have the power of the British government to come in and
Hmm.
say, "What are you doing to actually fix this problem?" Like if you search on Twitter, you can find tons of women who've been complaining about this and were
Hmm.
completely ignored. Or it got worse because they said something about it. People were
Yeah.
looking for new pictures of them to be able to utilize for this. And so I think it does say something that we've desensitized ourselves as a society to be able to be like, oh, this is it's just what you do. It's just rage
Yeah.
bait.
Hmm.
It's just edgelord behavior instead of these are real humans that are being harassed, this is being done to them without their consent. And we need to have like those tough conversations about that. We really
Yeah.
do.
Well, one thing I've seen is that oh, you shouldn't care because it's not real. It's AI. It's an AI photo. It's not
Yeah.
like it's not really you, you know? And it's like, well, but it looks like me. It has my face on it. And
Yeah.
even though I can recognize here within, or like I, and then we can recognize that here in this photo, it's
Yeah.
not real. It's AI. What if that, photo gets taken offline and then,
Hmm.
people assume that it is real?
Yeah.
you know there's like all these like further consequences that it seems people either want to be completely obtuse to or just aren't thinking that far ahead.
I
It could
think
be
it's
both.
I really think it's a lack of empathy. I think we as humans see each other as content instead of other humans.
Hmm.
And so unless it affects us personally or if it's someone that we care about,
Hmm.
we just don't care. I think we have created a culture where we treat each other like NPCs. And so it's
Hmm.
like that's not real. You're not a real person. You're just someone
Hmm.
on the internet. You're probably a bot
Hmm.
instead of having the empathy to see that other person on the other side. I think that has a lot to do with it.
Yeah. This also reminds me of you were talking about earlier, just the proliferation of gambling and
Mhm.
how that's gone on to affect actual like athletes that are playing the
Mhm.
sports because
Yeah.
you have their fans running, going up to them and yelling at them that they lost money
Yep.
because they bet on them to, do something or to win and then they didn't.
Mhm.
And, you have athletes coming out and saying like gambling needs to be like go away
Mhm.
forever because like it's
Yeah.
completely changed the game. It's completely changed like the concept, right?
Yep.
Of like, people participating in the, activity as just like for fun and now
Yeah.
putting money behind it. And
Yeah.
because people are losing lots and lots of money,
Yeah.
it's suddenly become where like, well, who do you blame? Well, I'm not going to blame myself for being an idiot and gambling. I have to put it
Yeah.
outward of like, he should have won that game. He should have
Yeah.
like shot that goal.
Yeah.
Um, and like, it's also really easy to dehumanize sports star because they're making money. They're, like
Yeah.
who cares? They live in their like fancy houses and like their private like neighborhoods or whatever. But it's like it starts there and it kind of comes down. And now we're seeing people starting to gamble on other things. I saw recently that you're going to be allowed to gamble on whether we're going to have a recession or like a housing recession. And it's like,
I
well,
would argue the betting in general is proof. Like it's very
right.
much a recession indicator.
Right. But then it's like, now some people are actively wanting things to get so bad,
Yeah.
housing wise, because they want to make money. They want, global
Well,
events to
it's not
happen
even
because
that.
they
It's
want to
yeah.
make money. Right.
Well, it's not even that too. It's obviously the money, but So much of gambling is dopamine farming. It's not just like, I lost money, I can stop doing this, or I can make money so I can stop doing this. Like, it's addictive for a reason. We are conditioning ourselves for the worst possible behavior. And I keep
Mhm.
seeing it, like, not just with
Yeah.
gambling, but just social media in general, is we have incentivized bad behavior
Mhm.
to the point where we've conditioned people for, like, you want to go viral? You want everyone to know who you are?
Mhm.
Do something scandalous, say something
Mhm.
horrible,
Yeah.
and then we're shocked when there's bad actors. Like, it's very much cause and effect. Could not be more clear, cause and
Mhm.
effect.
Yeah, and I think this also goes back to what we as marketers can be doing, right? If we are
Yes.
actively participating in that, if we
Yes.
are, being the Wendy's and the Duolingos and like the Clulies and all these like rage baiters who are like using rage bait as a strategy to attract more attention to
Mhm.
our product and
Yep.
to our service, you're participating in that, right?
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah. You're
and
part of the problem.
yeah. And those are decisions that you do have control over,
Mhm.
and actually we're starting to see, right, where it's not working as much anymore. I would just bring the examples of Cooley and Friend.ai, right, where it's like now they've rage baited so hard that people actively hate them and
Mhm.
want them to fail, right?
Yeah.
So now you have people that like will provoke and like rage bait that side, right, against Cluely and like Friend. So it's like, where does it end? As a marketer, it's like, do you want to get to that point where it's like people hate you and your company? It's like you're opting in for like a quick moment, flash in the pan. Um, and then the repercussion on the backside is that people hate you, and then you have to try to dig yourself out of that hole and try to get customers and consumers to come buy your product. And unless your product is so good, like it's gonna be really hard for you to like come out of that. And we're seeing that with like Cluely, where it's like now they've switched over to like being a note taker or whatever.
Mhm.
But nobody wants to use them, and more importantly, nobody trusts them
Yep.
to like be a note taker because of like everything that goes behind that, right? It's just like, no, I'm not going to trust a company that its like first mantra was like cheat on everything, right?
Yep.
Um, and then with like Friend AI, it's like, well, you're doing all this like rage baity stuff, but you're not actually fixing the product. So
Mhm.
now it's like they've gotten enemies.
Yeah.
You really should be moving away from that and not be using it as a strategy anymore.
100%. If you believe in the power of branding,
Hmm.
then that is not a sustainable long-term play.
Yeah.
It absolutely isn't. And pivoting is going to be significantly harder because
Hmm.
it's going to look reactionary. It's going to look like you're trying to apologize without apologizing. And so
Exactly.
it's definitely going to be a problem. And a lot of these AI companies are going to struggle too because
Hmm.
like it's very easy to replicate AI capabilities now because everyone's plugged into the same LLMs. And so it's definitely very interesting to see how this is going to play out because if they have a competitor in the space, which obviously they already do, there's already positive sentiment.
Hmm.
Like they created their own red ocean
Hmm.
for attention, and it's wild.